They called it the most beautiful palace in the world, but beneath its golden roofs, the air reeked of secrets and death. Topkapi Palace, the shimmering heart of the Ottoman Empire, where sultans ruled continents with a flick of their hand, and where silence was more terrifying than screams. Every stone, every corridor whispered the same truth. Here loyalty meant survival. And survival meant obedience to madness. It is said that when night fell over the Bosphorus, the palace changed its skin. The laughter of the day faded, the sound of silk curtains brushing marble floors echoed through the halls, and shadows grew longer in the courtyards. Behind locked doors, whispers began, about who might vanish before dawn. The Ottoman sultans ruled with divine power, yet they trusted no one, not their viziers, not their brothers, not even their sons. To sit on the throne meant to walk barefoot across blades. One wrong step and the silk cord awaited you. It began centuries ago when Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, realized that power could not be shared. After him, every new sultan made a choice, a blood-stained law that became royal tradition. Upon ascending the throne, a sultan could order the execution of his brothers. They called it fratricide, the killing of one's own blood, justified by a chilling phrase, for the sake of the empire. The idea was simple: one ruler, one throne, no rivals. But inside these marble walls the idea turned to terror. Newborn princes grew up knowing that their brothers were not family, they were threats. Each boy smiled at the other, but behind his eyes lived fear. When one became sultan, the others knew their time was borrowed. And so, the dungeons beneath Topkapi became both tomb and theater, the stage where royal blood was spilled in silence. No blades, no screams. Just the soft tightening of silk around a throat. Silk, because it was forbidden to spill royal blood. The stranglers, known as bastanchi, moved like ghosts. They were chosen for their strength and silence. At night, they entered a prince's chamber, bowed their heads and waited. The condemned would recognize them instantly. No words were exchanged. A prayer was whispered, and then the cord did its work. It was a ritual, calm, deliberate, terrifyingly dignified. When it was done, the body was wrapped in velvet, carried through secret corridors and buried before sunrise. The empire slept peacefully above, unaware that a life had ended beneath their feet. But there were worse fates than death in the Ottoman court. For some princes the silk cord never came. Instead they were locked away, in a place so strange, it defied imagination. They called it the caves, the cage. A luxurious prison of marble and gold, deep within the palace. Here the royal heirs who posed a threat to the throne lived in isolation. They had no mirrors, no weapons, no freedom. Time lost its meaning. Some stayed there for decades, forgotten by the world outside. Their only visitors were guards who never spoke. Food was slid through small openings. No one dared look the princes in the eyes. They were alive, yet dead, ghosts of royal blood breathing within the cage. One such prince was Mustafa, the son of Sultan Ahmed I. He lived half his life in that gilded cage, losing his mind to solitude. When fate finally placed the crown upon his head, he had forgotten how to rule. They called him Mustafa the Mad. He wandered the palace barefoot, speaking to animals, laughing at walls, and whispering to his reflection in the water fountains. Once he tried to free the royal horses, declaring them his ministers. Another time he ordered the palace birds to be dressed in jewels. Yet even in his madness, Mustafa feared the silence of the palace, the endless footsteps that crept closer at night, as if the stranglers still roamed, waiting for him. And they were. Because in Topkapi, even madness wasn't protection. The sultan's paranoia grew with power. Spies listened behind curtains. Eunuchs carried messages wrapped in their robes. Concubines plotted from within the harem, whispering alliances that could bring even the most powerful man to ruin. It was said that the harem wasn't just a place of pleasure, it was a battlefield without swords. Every woman fought not for love but for survival. Because the mother of the next sultan would become Valide Sultan, the most powerful woman in the empire. And for that throne, poison was often the sharpest weapon. Even the shadows of the harem trembled at the name Kozum Sultan, the woman who ruled behind the veil. 4 years she controlled the empire, playing the game of power with elegance and cruelty. But when her stepson, Sultan Murad IV, took the throne, he grew tired of her dominance. Murad was not like other sultans. He had seen the empire crumble under weak rulers and drunken princes. He banned alcohol, tobacco, and coffee, executing anyone who defied his orders. But his own rage was the deadliest addiction of all. It is said that one night he walked into the palace gardens with his bow, testing his aim. He saw a man smoking in the dark, a forbidden act. Without hesitation he drew his bow and shot the man dead. The next morning he ordered that the man's body remain on display as a warning. Murad IV ruled through fear, yet the fear never left him. Every banquet, every whisper, every drop of wine in his goblet could mean death. He trusted no one, not even his own mother, Kozum. And when she tried to control him, he silenced her the only way the Ottomans knew how, with silk. The same palace that crowned kings also buried mothers. And the dungeons beneath Topkapi still wait, silent, cold, and forgotten. Some say that at night, if you walk near the ancient walls, you can still hear it, the faint echo of a voice whispering in Turkish, "For the sake of the empire." The deeper you go beneath Topkapi Palace, the colder it gets. The marble floors lose their shine and the air grows heavy, not with dust but with memory. Somewhere down here the echoes of the past still breathe. Few ever saw the true depths of the palace. Even fewer returned sane. These were not just dungeons. They were a kingdom beneath a kingdom, the dark reflection of Ottoman glory. It was said that the walls themselves could hear confessions. That the blood of viziers, traitors and lovers had soaked into the stone so deeply, you could still feel their warmth centuries later. The Ottomans were masters of silence. They did not parade their cruelty like Western monarchs who burned and beheaded in public squares. No, Ottoman punishment was private, methodical, and almost sacred. Every act of execution was performed with the grace of ritual and the precision of a prayer. Down here the chief executioner, known as the Selat Beysai, reigned supreme. His face was never seen in daylight. He was the Sultan's shadow, the invisible hand of death. His quarters were near the imperial kitchens, so that the aroma of roasted meat might mask the metallic scent of his work. When the Sultan issued an order, often written on a scrap of silk or whispered by a eunuch, the Selat Beysai obeyed without hesitation. He did not question. He did not feel. At night, the condemned would be led through the gate of felicity, the same gate through which sultans once paraded their triumphs. But for those taken at night, it was a one-way path. The prisoners were brought to the Yedikule fortress or the palace dungeons, narrow, torchlit corridors where shadows danced on damp walls. There was no screaming aloud. Not because of mercy, but because noise was undignified. The Ottomans preferred elegance, even in death. The condemned were told to pray. Then came the silk bowstring, strong, silent, beautiful. The executioners, trained from youth, wrapped it around the victim's neck and pulled with expert precision. It was said that a true Bostanchi could end a life before a final breath escaped the lips. And when it was over, the executioners would wash their hands in cold water, bow to the lifeless body and leave without a word. No blade, no blood, only silence. But not everyone was granted such a clean death. Some, the Sultan wanted to break. There were chambers designed not for killing but for erasing a man's will. The Dungeon of Tears was one such place, a dimly lit cell said to drive men mad within days. Prisoners were kept in isolation, their chains connected to the wall so tightly they couldn't lie down. Water dripped constantly from the ceiling, marking time like a cruel clock. The sound was maddening, drip, drip, drip. It was said that even the rats avoided that cell. One of the most terrifying stories from these dungeons was that of Ibrahim Pasha, once the Grand Vizier and closest friend of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. They had grown up together, fought wars side by side, and built an empire together. But the palace trusted no bonds, not even friendship. Whispers spread through the harem that Ibrahim had grown too powerful, too proud. He had dared to place his own seal above the Sultan's. One night, after a lavish banquet in his honor, Ibrahim retired to his chambers within the palace. He was drunk on power, unaware that silk cords awaited him behind the curtain. At dawn, his lifeless body was found, wrapped in velvet, his face serene, his lips still stained with wine. Sultan Suleiman never spoke his name again. Even the portrait of Ibrahim in the palace was taken down, his memory erased from songs and poems. It was as if he had never existed. That was the Ottoman way. When you fell, you didn't just die, you vanished. But perhaps the most terrifying chapter of all was written under Sultan Ibrahim I, known to history as Ibrahim the Mad. Born and raised in the cage, he was the product of a life spent in silence. Decades of isolation had rotted his mind before he ever touched the throne. When he finally became sultan, the palace trembled, not with power but with dread. Ibrahim saw the world as a plaything. He filled the palace pools with perfume instead of water, forced his servants to feed his pet lions by hand, and demanded that his concubines dress as mermaids to entertain him. But his pleasures grew darker. He was obsessed with women, not out of love but domination. He ordered his harem of hundreds to bathe together, then choose one by throwing an apple into the pool. The woman who caught it would be his for the night. Once, in a fit of rage, he ordered the execution of all 280 concubines in his harem, accusing them of betrayal. The Selat Beysai obeyed. The women were tied in silk sacks and thrown into the Bosphorus. Their bodies drifted under the moonlight, silent as their palace. Even the Grand Viziers feared to speak. Ibrahim's madness deepened until he saw conspiracies everywhere. He accused his mother, Kozum Sultan, of plotting against him, and ordered her imprisonment. But Kozum was not a woman to be destroyed easily. She conspired with the viziers and the palace guards. And one night as the mad sultan slept, they struck. Ibrahim awoke to see shadows in his chamber, the same shadows that had haunted his dreams in the cage. He screamed, called for his guards, but no one came. The silk cord descended once more. It was as if the ghosts of the Ottoman dungeon had returned to claim their final king. When the news of his death spread, the palace was silent. No celebration, no mourning, just relief. But in the darkness of those corridors, something remained. To this day, some say that the walls of Topkapi still whisper at night. That the echoes of strangled princes and broken queens linger in the cold marble. And sometimes, when the wind blows through the palace gates, it sounds almost like a breath, a sigh, a voice saying, "For the sake of the empire." The air inside Topkapi Palace feels different at night. The tourists are gone. The voices fade. And the marble corridors seem to remember. In the stillness, you can almost hear the echoes, a faint rustle of silk, a whisper of footsteps, the distant chime of a key turning in an iron lock. But these sounds are not from this century. They belong to the ghosts of a time when the Ottoman Empire ruled over 3 continents, when sultans commanded armies with a single gesture, and when the same hands that built mosques of gold also signed death warrants with the same elegance. After Sultan Ibrahim's fall, the Ottoman throne continued, but something inside the empire had cracked. The fear that once kept courtiers obedient began to devour them from within. The Selat Beysai, the executioner, continued his silent work for centuries, carrying out the will of sultans who trusted no one, not even their own sons. Every time a new ruler ascended, the dungeons would echo again, claiming brothers, cousins, and advisors in the name of stability. And the strangest part? It worked. For generations, the Ottomans maintained their empire not through mercy, but through control born of terror. The palace became a place where love and loyalty were the most dangerous emotions of all. Even the walls of the cage, where princes waited for death or the throne, bore silent witness to madness. Some heirs prayed to die before being called to rule, others whispered to themselves for years, afraid of their own thoughts. The harem, a world of silks, jewels, and deception, remained both paradise and prison. Women who once wielded power through whispers now lived in constant dread of sharing Ibrahim's fate. Even Kozum Sultan, once the empire's most powerful woman, met her end at the hands of the very system she had helped create. One night, after years of ruling from behind the curtain, she too was strangled, in the same manner as the men she had condemned. Her body was buried quietly without ceremony. And so, the palace continued to feed on itself, consuming ambition, beauty, and blood with equal appetite. By the 19th century, when the empire began to crumble, the dungeons had already fallen silent. But silence does not mean peace. When the last sultan left Topkapi in 1924, he turned once more to glance at the great gates behind him, the gate of felicity, where for centuries the destinies of men had been sealed. Witnesses said he looked pale, almost haunted, as if he could still hear the whispers of those who had died in his name. Years later, when the palace was opened as a museum, workers reported strange phenomena. Doors that slammed on their own. Flickering lamps in the dungeon halls. Footsteps that echoed when no one was there. And in the chamber of the executioner's fountain, where the silk cords were washed after each death, visitors claimed to feel a chill as if unseen eyes watched them from the shadows. Some even said they heard water trickling, though the fountain had been dry for decades. Historians call it imagination. But in a place where centuries of power and pain collided, can imagination explain everything? Perhaps the palace remembers. Perhaps the empire never truly died. Because some thrones, even when empty, still breathe. And when the wind howls through Topkapi's corridors, past the cages and the chambers and the fountains of silence, it carries with it a faint, haunting whisper. The empire forgives no one, not even its kings.